Well, here we are, another week live, and we'll be putting in the link to join us in a little while. This week, we are joined so far by David Harry, and of course we have all the regular crew, Kristin, Terry, Bill, and myself, and we have no idea where we're going on topic, but when has that ever been a problem for us? Bill, what have you been up to this week?
I've been up to trying to figure out what this rank brain people keep on talking about is. And I've been hunting down all the team members from the Google Brain team to try to figure out what part they play and whether or not they're still with Google or if they've moved on to Facebook. And it seems like a number of them have moved on to Facebook.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what they're doing over there.
What's happening on Facebook? Right.
Cool.
Is
So,
Facebook stealing Google's brain? I don't know.
Yeah, it makes me wonder what they're doing over there because the different guys they've picked up from the neural nets, the AI, and stuff like that. Like that Milikoff guy, some of his first papers were with Microsoft, and 4 months later he was with Google. I think he did 1 or 2 with them, and then he was gone from there another 4 months later off to Facebook. So that guy's been bouncing around. So, yeah.
AI at the moment is the big battleground for pretty much all of them. And there's only so much established talent in the field. There's more coming, but you know, it takes a long time to get through your studies in that sort of field and to build up your chops, so to speak. So yeah, it's fierce. So Bill, you're looking at brand stuff, eh? So Rank Brain obviously is all about brand search. Yeah, I knew it.
I wouldn't say that, but
and schema and reasonable surfers and.
Oh, you didn't say that, but we all know in SEO you have to read between the lines. It's not what they say.
Oh yeah, which was my favorite one I did today, which was, for some reason Barry decided to ask, would Google roll out Penguin when both Gary and John Mueller are on vacation? And invariably all of a sudden I start watching comments around this, and some people are saying, of course they wouldn't. Some people are saying, oh, but maybe that's when they do it, so there's no one around to take the bitching. And it was almost like the Matt's Day. It just, you know, people were reading things into the 2 guys taking vacation. Like 2 guys going vacation, all of a sudden it could be Penguin. It's like, oh, it's painful.
Yeah.
How many years did Matt Cutts not go on vacation? And then took one, and he took a vacation that lasted over a year.
Well over a year. He's only.
He was probably just smarter. He probably took vacations. He just had stuff programmed into his loop to make it look like he was still there. He knew what would happen.
Yeah, we all know there is no Matt Cutts really. That's a stand-in that goes to conferences. Matt Cutts, the real one, is an AI. They've been using it for years.
But yeah, I'm telling you, Bill, this rank brain thing after this week goes in the swear jar column because I'm getting trolled by my own people now. Anytime they see some sort of silly rank article, they sort of giggle and start sending it to me because they know there's steam coming out my ears at this point. So, anyways, by the way, anyone watching, the rank brain expert thing in my tag is just well, it's kind of an inside joke here. So there are no experts.
No. Oh, come on, there's experts, ninjas, gurus.
Rank
Brain's been around for 10 years, right? So you're allowed to be an expert at it.
Well, there was one I got trolled with. One I got trolled with today. I'm reading through this thing, and it goes past rank brain. It starts going into PageRank, and the guy states that PageRank is part of Hummingbird. I was like, oh, okay, people, really, I'm gonna kill someone. So,
it
yeah.
kind of is, because Hummingbird is the entire engine, and if Rank Brain plugs into that somehow, then technically it's sort of a part of Hummingbird. Hummingbird is still the
Yeah, but this was even page ranked, so they were, so unless we have some sort of technical doc specification showing us what's a part of what, I just avoid those kind of conversations, no?
Right. I mean, let's come up with this thing called Hummingbird 10 years after PageRank's around, and let's say PageRank's now part of Hummingbird. It's like, show us a map or something.
Yeah. Well, it is in a way. It's it's kind of, if you think that engines change, petrol pretty much stays the same, but engines change. Is the engine still running on petrol? Yes, it is.
Well, PageRank's supposedly based on links and how things are linked together. Hummingbird has nothing to do with links.
No, but it depends which spokesman you're listening to. I mean, the algorithmic changes of Hummingbird, you and I have talked about, but what Danny was told, apparently, is that Hummingbird is the whole engine again. It's the update of the system. It's almost like, there's Android as an operating system, but there's Jelly Bean.
I think my only point is, unless someone gives me a flowchart, I'm just going to leave them as different things I talk about. How things are plugged into each other is, I'm just not foolish enough to go there personally.
Yeah, Hummingbird was.
It's like saying.
I was just going to say, Hummingbird was a way of rewriting the core engine, so that way all of the different multiple parts of the engine, so the different subroutines, if you could say, like subroutines upon subroutines, could all work together with a much easier, because it was becoming a jumbled mess. Basically,
that made it much more jumbled mess explaining it that way. Because query rewriting has very nothing to do with link analysis and how pages are linked to each other.
Oh, absolutely true. I agree with that.
The difference is maybe we don't always know. We hear a name in association with a thing, but sometimes there's 3 or 4 things have changed. I can replace my window by replacing the whole wall. Now you hear me call this something. Now, am I talking about the wall or the window? They've both been replaced. And we don't necessarily know that the algorithm changes we saw are the extent of Hummingbird, or whether Hummingbird was also the I/O channels, the input-output channels that enabled all that extra query rewriting to happen. So some of the accounts I've seen say that Google said it was an engine change rather than an algorithm. Now I haven't had a chance to really nail that down with an engineer that I trust to say, look, is it this or is it this? And, of course, whether they'd be able to answer us.
When Google acquired the company DeepMind, supposedly the contract that allowed for that merger called for the creation of a group that was supposed to keep an eye on AI for Google and DeepMind and monitor it and police it. I guess so that artificial intelligence doesn't approach the singularity and take over, or try to. Nobody's admitting who are members of that group that's supposed to monitor AI.
Well, yeah, is there any reporting from them? Is there any public reporting on that, or are they just going to keep it to themselves? So, becomes an issue.
Well, this is it. The internal one will be exactly that. It'll be an internal one so that they can let it know trade secrets, whereas, of course, an external body, you've then got to be careful. You can explain the scope of what you're doing, but you can't get into the specifics. So I think there is a reason for them to have an internal body rather than just the kind of initiative that Elon Musk has been sponsoring, where he wants an oversight committee for all AI globally.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff I've even run into is more robotics than anything else. You know what I mean? Where they're using this kind of stuff. it's obviously well beyond search, you know. And if anything, it's I think from what I've been finding, it's my journey is so much more of it's actually being done on the robotics side of things than anywhere else that I could find. Like search, it's kind of almost newer for me to hear about it in that context, but in robotics, it's for years and years and years, obviously. So
Yeah.
now that's again the other side you got to look at on that coin. Not just Google, you got to worry about with that stuff.
Zara says she's waiting for the new algorithm, Squirrel, which will surely highlight all relevant and irrelevant context links and keywords. Yeah. Oh, yeah, it'll go in all directions. Yeah. You won't be able to find anything.
See, I'm just waiting for them to get pissed with Penguin maybe not working. That's what it took, Panda, and just full-on release the polar bear. He's carnivorous, comes out, just eats people up. So. I think a polar bear would be better for Google at this point. Oh, speaking of which, a while back we were talking about the changes with the FTC in the States and stuff around bloggers and things like that. Apparently that's what last week's round of external link ones were somewhat based on, is reviews for freebies.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. Google's been talking about this for some time. It's been accelerating over the past few months. And yeah.
Well, yeah, they put stuff on their blog. It was like a shot over the bow. You almost could have seen this one coming,
Exactly. I was kind of.
I think I missed this one. So obviously, I'm aware of the FTC and how they're going after people who get reviews for freebies. But we're talking about Google now penalizing.
Yeah. Okay. About a month, maybe 3 weeks ago, probably 3 weeks ago, because I've only started doing our thing for that long. There was this blog post actually from Google itself highlighting, their stance on that. You know what I mean? And at the time, I was only sharing the FTC stuff because it's relative. So essentially, Google made a public statement about this in one of their blogs about 3 weeks ago, and then over the weekend, some people started reporting that they were getting manual actions for outbound links. And then after a couple more days, I guess people started to clear the smoke a bit. It's turning out to be a lot of bloggers and people that are kind of, writing a blog post and putting a link to whoever gave them the free product. So if you're getting, and I've known clients that have done that, give away product, even when they didn't ask for the blogger in question to, link to them. They didn't. You know what I mean? But again, you got to watch almost where your PR teams are working and stuff like that, because you get in a bad neighborhood or location that Google's might look at it that way, then you could be hit by this new manual thing. And again, they put on blogs, so this round is kind of doing exactly what it's doing. It's getting the SEO world's attention, getting the word out beyond just a blog post. Google's certainly learned over the years you can't just change the link guidelines and expect everyone to respect them. You got to smack them around a bit first.
I mean, does this mean that journalistic websites like The Verge or IGN or etc. In the gaming space, for instance, right, where reviews are prolific? I mean, I run a gaming site. I mean, we get hundreds of requests for reviews, and we do reviews, right? And we mention specifically this is a review. We were provided with a copy, etc. But I mean, of course, we're going to link to the company. We're going to link to the source. We're going to link to all sorts of different things.
Exactly.
I can't see a way of them policing that. Not even outright.
You actually provide disclosure.
Right? Don't follow them.
What it is they've got a new round of manual penalty notices going out to people about unnatural links, outbound links, instead of inbound links, which is the previous notices. It's always been on the recipient instead of on the giver. Well, this time they're looking at the giver, and they're specifically looking at, look, you obviously have an affiliation with this site. We've spotted your affiliation with this site. Either no follow those links or get rid of those links. One or the other, because it's not on. That's the story.
So, the crazy thing about that is I could see if somebody was, say, paying IGN to review the latest game, right, which is already a big no-no in the gaming industry. But if it's actually a earned link where somebody has reviewed the product and either reviewed the product in a good way or even in a bad way, because, I mean, obviously there's a lot of bad reviews, forcing somebody to put a no-follow on that link just because that just kind of doesn't seem right, because it is attributable to that.
Well, this is it. It's not always been. Look, you haven't had one of these notices. The way you're doing it is obviously okay. But there are a lot of companies who do not disclose links that they should disclose by law, by the FTC regulations.
Oh, absolutely.
Those are the ones Google are hitting.
Oh, got it. That makes sense.
I'll give you an idea too, Ben. Well, a couple of years ago, one of our members had run into some problems, and so we had people we know at Google, so we talked to them, and essentially it was the case where they were giving away free products, but they weren't. I saw the emails, and when I talked to the Googler, I said, "Here's the emails we sent out. Nothing in there says send us a link." But the Googler basically told Terry and I that it's not as much it's not as much what you asked for or didn't ask for, or what was disclosed. It's also the location itself. As he said it, at the time, if one blog posts about duct tape and the next one's about diamond rings, that's probably not somewhere you're going to want to be a part of. And I'm not talking CNN. I'm talking like blogs and stuff. Like obviously, blog has many different things going on, but that's essentially what he said is you got to police where those are showing up and who you're sending them to. Don't just willy-nilly get some list and sending it out to 1,000 bloggers. Be a little pickier and chooser on where you're doing it. Find someone who's a food blogger or something. Have that, because it was brownies at the time. It was chocolate brownies. Have someone like a food blogger that everything's relatively about food and they have some authority. Don't just start sending them out to TikTok, Tom, Dick, and Harry's blog, and that's the kind of stuff. So I would assume to a degree, like Ammon's saying, if you haven't got nailed, probably a good sign. But in our private conversations with Googlers, that's kind of what they said. So I think that's where you're higher at risk than if you've got an all-video game site. You know what I'm saying?
Where I would think this would be tricky is where we're getting things like you've got a blogger who talks often about proper exercise for their dogs, and they're showing all these walks, and then suddenly all these articles keep mentioning specific dog food that they give their it's got this accidental mention of, oh well, my puppy had puppy kibble before we went on this lovely walk, and there's always a link. Well, it's pretty obvious that you've been paid to put a link in there. And if you haven't disclosed it, if you haven't put this post is sponsored by such and such, and you're trying to sneak it in there, that's exactly the kind of thing that Google will be hitting, could and should quite rightly be hitting. If you've got that kind of thing going on, stop it now.
In my experience, also, any site that kind of intimates our links to you increase your rankings, that's a no-no on a site. I watched direct back in the day, went back constantly, checking them to see how Google was treating them, and when they start kicking them out, they all were either charging for really crappy directory or were intimating free links, basically.
Yeah, or any site, Terry, remember we used to research, or any site that has an advertising page and one of the options is an in-article link. And believe me, people put these things on their blogs. It's amazing.
Yeah, Zara says, Dave, she's going to become the new squirrel rank expert. So. I don't think it's ever too early to start branding on these things. It might come about.
I like it. It's probably as valuable as my thing there, honey.
Exactly. You don't have to wait for Google, Zara. What you do is you write a book all about the squirrel bait approach now, and then whether it comes true or not, people will still be talking about it. A bit like LSI, really.
Yeah.
Dave loves it.
I'm not even an expert on raising my children because they keep changing all the time too. Being a parent is like being an SEO. Damn things, my kids keep changing all the time. I'll never be an expert at them at this rate. If they'd stayed 6, I'd probably be an expert by now. But I can't even say I'm an expert at raising my. Oh, that's bad.
What I'm really interested in at the moment is, we've been talking for a couple of years about the Internet of Things. So I'm really interested in when machines are going to be starting to search for resources. When our machines are looking for other machines, and how that kind of search is going to come in. Because let's face it, that could outstrip human search. That might be the next massive shake-up, is when our apps and devices are learning to talk to each other and discover each other, and of course using search to do so.
Well, to a degree they are. If you remember on Friday, we were talking with Edward, who does the 360 photos and the internal mapping for Google. Like he was saying, that even that app, as you walk into that store, is going to recognize who you are, what kind of price point you searched for, and they have tags, price tags, that will change on the fly as you approach it in that store, geolocated, right? So I think we're almost there if you think about what you said, Ammon, because that's you're querying, and if it's different things in different apps, all communicating with those little Google ball that's in the store, and already these things are changing on the fly for you, personalized, so that you don't have to query it, so that you don't have to ask a question. I think, isn't that the ultimate search, is when it anticipates us so well that it's giving us what we want without having to search as much?
Exactly.
That might not be good for Google, but I think that's where they're kind of thinking.
Well, I think it's got to be something they're giving thought to. Is Google traditionally has kept all the search within itself, but you kind of want to open out the APIs even further so that other machines can use Google search, so it can be right at the core of things. And yeah, those beacons in shops that look up who you are, they're going to need to be able to look up who you are and find various databases about you and query several different sources. Some of those can be hardwired in, but you'd probably also want it to be able to look for a couple of new sources as well on the fly.
Well, sure, you know what I mean? If in the past weeks I've slowly been making my process to the purchase. Maybe I started in my Facebook app that Android saw me talking about it. Then I went and searched Google for the product. Then I found a couple of places I liked. And then, I did an entity, a navigational search for a couple of these places a week after that. You can almost figure out what prices have I seen, right, in all that whole process, so that when you're walking up to that, changing the fly price tag, it's going to put it somewhere in a median in between. Assuming the fact that you're standing there now, that you're not going to spend another $10 in gas to go find it somewhere else. So yeah, all that stuff starts communicating. You just think at the end, like for stores and things of that nature, that's a massive advantage.
Yeah. I can't imagine this being economical for the average store yet, but I can certainly see this for everything from realty, so real estate agents having the house prices that adjust on the fly to what other properties you've seen, what kind of properties you're interested in, so that if they've got one they're trying to move that's not in your usual sort of taste, the thing that you've been looking at so far, it might drop the price a little further. If there's something that it knows is right up your alley and you'd probably pay a bit more for, yeah, that price goes up a little bit. So it's
well, imagine, if they implement that with like some high-end restaurants, like you say, that might have a little extra budget lying around. It could tell what types of restaurants you've been to lately by geolocating your phone. It could tell what kinds of recipes and different things you've looked up. Do you a lot of Italian food? What are you doing? And you could walk into a restaurant and have the maitre d' be able to suggest something to each individual customer based upon all that. Oh, this is really good tonight, or whatever.
Google did get a patent on the 31st of December for digital audio watermarking, where they can pick up on sounds that your phone picks up and identify you based upon what you're listening to. Associate that with your phone. And then if it's making an association between your Android ID and who you are, it can identify you as having been someone who listens to some type of audio watermark in some location that you visit, which could be a restaurant.
We've got most of that. Your mic seems to be going a bit raspy again.
But yeah, I think a lot of that's very, any of that mobile stuff like that. Like I've been addicted to the Android lately, and just all the different things I've been pushing the boundaries with it. And it's, some of it's hit and miss, but a lot of it's a lot better than it was with physical, and it's neat. So yeah, kind of like you, Bill, I kind of extra watch out for various different mobile things. And again, after hanging out with Edward last year about all this, it's something that you gotta think of. And I think it's fascinating just as a user. Sometimes I just step away from being, someone who follows it to being just a user, and I like it.
I think you have to be, a genuine fan of the internet and a fan of search to really be any good at plan with it. You know, you've got to have a passion for it. You've got to be interested. If search itself doesn't interest you, if the possibilities of new systems don't interest you, then probably SEO isn't a good career to be headed into.
I guess one question that I would have with RankBrain and that I've been thinking about is I mean, I don't know a huge amount about the topic, by the way. I mean, I've just started. I'm not like David. I'm not an expert, definitely, on this topic whatsoever. iBeacons, I do know a lot. I do know a lot about iBeacons, but you know, the question I would have about with RankBrain is just because from the mechanics of how I understand it works so far, is how could there ever be, say, a RankBrain optimization expert, kind of like how we have SEO experts? How could somebody actually optimize for something like RankBrain?
You don't.
That's what I was
you don't. It's again. Yeah.
Can't.
What you do is you change your thinking. Your thinking has to change to realise that all that stuff you used to do, where you'd look at keywords and you'd compare volumes and things like that, well, keyword volumes mean squat now, because the keywords people are typing in aren't necessarily the keywords they're getting answers to. And it could be that, yeah, that phrase doesn't give very many and that phrase doesn't give very many, but between them they're all giving the same results as this other phrase that you were thinking, oh, that's too competitive to go for. Well, yeah, this is it. The long tail keyword is dying a death a little bit.
Agreed.
And wouldn't you almost say that in the sense then SEO is kind of falling to its death? I mean, not kind of in a way. As it moves more towards intent and personalization, now it's completely about intent and personalization, where to the fact that could we see, I mean, God knows how long it's going to take, but where search is extremely, it's very transparent.
Again, you know, one thing I've learned over the last while is that, well, twofold. Let me start your first part of your question. Is the problem is everyone's a Google optimizer. They're not a search engine optimizer. So wherever there's a search box with I can hit enter. If it's Amazon, if it's Yelp, if it's YouTube, if my client needs to be there, then that's the search engine I'm worried about. So that's the first problem. So all we've been talking about is Google. The second thing would be that again, search is now becoming apps for me. Search is becoming the Google Assistant route, meaning, you know, how do I advise a doctor? I make sure that he's, A, in my wife's contacts, B, he sends tries to get her on a mailing list or something like that. Just generally surfacing that entity within someone's contacts on Gmail will actually do wonders, because all you have to do now is go get doctor's appointment, and your phone goes and does it. Now, how did it know to go and use him and this and that? Why would she use him instead of another doctor? Because she's used to just being able to say that into the phone. So being prominent entity to your consumer base beyond Google, the search engine, is still part of the job to me. That's someone searching for something, and it could be searching a contact, whatever. But if you look at that whole, SMX keynote, and you play with the technology enough, search becomes querying the cell phone. What the person's querying may not always be a search engine or whatever. You know, showing up in different places and being prominent in your user's life. Everything's going to be personalized even more and more as we go forward, because everyone doesn't even know they're being personalized on their phone half the time. You think reading terms of service is bad on the desktop? Imagine someone on the phone. Yeah, agree. Okay, agree. Whatever. You know. So.
I'd even take it just back a step further than that. Traditionally, the first people to talk about searcher intent were SEOs, and we were talking about this in the 90s. We were saying, look, just because this word is something you want to rank for doesn't mean it's the thing that people using that word want to find. The classic example that I used to use was, a company who sold video players wanted to rank #1 for video. This is the internet. Half the people doing search for video are looking for the actual film. And of those, about 60% are looking for porn.
Do you remember when 1 and 2 search? You remember when 1 and 2 word queries used to be like the big thing?
Oh yeah. I remember when every web hosting company, gosh, all throughout the 90s and even 2000s, they were like, we want to rank for web hosting. That's what we want to rank for, is web hosting.
Stick a young person on a computer, man, and they've got at least 3 to 4 word queries every time because they know how specific they need to be to find the information in a timely manner. You know, you can't discount the fact that new generations of users are using the internet differently too. You know, that's where your demographic comes into it. If you're targeting 60-year-olds, it's live from 16-year-olds. You're in gaming, you understand that, I'm sure. You know, so.
I created a website for a lawyer. I made sure that we ranked well for the different court systems in that state. People would look up the court and find this page about the court. It was, we anticipated that people would look up the court. We took documents that people would receive from the court and words that on those that were specific to that state. We optimized his pages for because we figured there would be words people could look up and say, what does this mean? I have no idea.
One thing that I noticed from actually using voice search is that Google is been becoming more aggressive when it comes to suggestions. Recently, when I speak to it, and what Bill was mentioning before, the context and having entities on the page is probably going to become increasingly important because the way they can suggest where I'm going next is understanding the entities on that page, and that exercise can help them to figure out what the page is about, what I'm looking at, and connect that to the next questions if they want to predict my.
Right, and anticipating how those entities might be related, and understand have some ability to show up and have those relations be understood on your pages.
Yeah, we're going to see some changes again to knowledge graph. I'm predicting in the next 6 to 8 months, not least because, of course, of that hijack recently. I don't know if you saw it, but I shared a post of it. Several people were talking about it generally. It went around like wildfire, but when you searched for baboon in Google, the knowledge graph box showed a picture of Donald Trump. Now, they fixed it. They jumped on it pretty quick.
No, what he was doing was hacking the code. It was Aaron Bradley. And what he was doing was he was taking apart the refer strings. He was changing characters in that. He created that on the fly, so to speak. I don't know. It's not working anymore. That was funny.
Yeah.
But that was Aaron that first messed around with that. That was really neat. But yeah, I don't know, Ammon. I just keep using your line everywhere now since you slapped me in the face, and that was my favorite moment of the last 2 weeks, which is all of search is predictive. It's like, man. And I battle all this crap, and then you went between the eyes from you. I was like, God. Well, it's not what I said, but this is your show. So, but I covered a patent a couple of years ago that on that predictive level. That was about geolocating and temporal factors. So essentially, it was making assumptions of if you travel from 9 till 5 to this point, stop, and then come back at 5, we can roughly start to assume this is your work. So if you're traveling an hour, whatever your drive is, it can start to look at things to offer you along the way and how that's going to change, which seems pretty straightforward. But then it went on to in the patent about Thanksgiving. Let's say you travel out of state or to a different province or a different area of England at that time of year, but only then. Or that time of year, and then at Christmas you go to this place as well. It can make an inference this is a close friend or a relative or this and that. And literally, in there, I think it was probably more people than anything at that point, but they were talking about showing you ads for where you're going to be in a week. 7 days out before you make that journey, start showing you ads. Even in the patent talked about people that go golfing, that at certain times of year you end up going to this commercial location and then back to your house, but only on weekends or only during these times of year. And it would again start to look at different ways to make use of that knowledge of your movement and habits to maybe show you hotels or whatever. Yeah, predictive stuff's neat.
Exactly that. I mean, search is all about patterns. The algorithms are all about patterns. The whole process is on patterns. And to a large extent, the thing I've always pointed out is human intelligence is based on patterns. Intelligence is a measure of how quickly you can spot a pattern. An IQ is literally how quickly can you spot the pattern. It's why, a high IQ and a low IQ, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be smarter, that you're going to get to a destination that nobody else could get to. It just tends to mean you move that little bit faster. You spot the pattern a little bit quicker than somebody with a lower IQ. And
so tell me, what do you think STOs are paranoid about change? Because it's funny, so many times over the years when these kind of things come along, or regardless if it's real time or if it's just something I read, a lot of SEOs tend to be like paranoid almost, like, oh, that's too much privacy, this and that. Whereas every user I know, like I show my wife or someone at the pub, they're like, oh, wow, I didn't know I could do that. That's amazing. The end user doesn't seem nearly as frightened as the industry. So how does that happen?
It's one of those things, isn't it? I think we know enough to be a little bit paranoid. We are worried about the amount of data that is collected to make this happen, and the more we see these things, we go, my goodness, how much of my life do they know? Whereas the home user, they don't know where the data comes from, they just see it happening. It's magic.
I go out in my car, I take my phone with me. There was a place I used to go stop at every morning and grab breakfast at. After a while, I noticed that Google had labeled that place as work. They were wrong, it was breakfast, but they recognized I was stopping there every day.
I think there was a period when the walls sync between, like, for example, they recognized my workplace, and then I was taking a Friday off and flying back home to Italy, and on that Friday they were reminding me, you're late for work, but actually they were not getting the fact that I was going on holiday. But then since they start capturing more structured data from emails and flights, they're probably less likely, and I saw that, like, they were not reminding me anymore whether I was late for work or not, but they were showing me contextual stuff to my holidays, and that's probably where things changed.
Right. I've seen a few people link to how Google tracks your location, provides a location history, and it maps out all the routes that you take over time, and clusters that information, where you visit, and so on. And yeah, that does seem somewhat intrusive, but it also gives them the opportunity to make recommendations to you of places that might be along your route, and that's part of the plan. I did come out with a patent yesterday. I think I need to write it up. It involves that location history and how they might cluster and track it, and then make recommendations based upon that type of information, which is interesting. I think it is intrusive, but it's still interesting. If they're sharing it with you, and only you, it's fine. If they're selling it to other people, which they aren't doing, I would have a problem with that.
Yeah, I know, man. Dude, when I think 2003, when I first started reading stuff on behavioral, I used to be very paranoid. Because again, it's that Spider-Man thing with great, responsibility. So, but problem is, I also look at it kind of like the government, and I don't know if we're able to change it too much. Now, does anyone listen to us?
That's something that does bug me. The way that politicians have managed to successfully give us the idea that, oh look, you're one person, you can't change government. But the whole thing is, we are the boss of government. Collectively,
But even the media, dude, like the first time the guy, a dojo member had says, "Hey Dave, we need someone to do an interview for the Wall Street Journal." People always like, "Oh Dave, that's so cool you were in there." I was like, "No, let me tell you the story because okay, so member sets me up. Now, how this was going down was that somebody at this corporation knew a writer at the Wall Street Journal, but one of his people couldn't talk to them because, well, duh, someone's going to connect the dots. So they just come and find random guy me and say, talk to him and ha ha ha. And they were basically talking about, look at this site cheating with links. And so anyways, whatever. Wall Street Journal guy calls me, right? And he's like, I want like the baseball scandal of Google and links and stuff. And I was like, dude, this is just one corporation trying to piss on another. He's like, yeah, Dave, as long as the facts are straight, where you been? He said, the media's been like this for hundreds of years. Wake up, little man. And I was like, yeah, okay, duh. So, it's not even just governments. The media themselves would rather have something to play with like that to manipulate than care. It's more than just government. I think it's so ubiquitous across everything that trying to get any word we got out is going to be tough.
Yeah, I was just saying. Yeah. By the way, that's it turns out it's a mistake. It's actually Wall Street in small town Indiana or something like that. But Google thought it was relevant because there's a pub there, and it's just got those two entities assigned on the knowledge graph. Dave, pub. Dave, pub.
Perfect. No one's going to get that that's watching this, but okay. Yeah.
I can sell you one rank brain for $99. I guarantee you'll get ranked. And your knowledge.
I will kill somebody.
Yeah, I'll take over that whole right side, and you'll have all those separate links because schemas rock. So, I don't know. Great conversation.
This thing's gonna haunt me like LSI. Man. It's gonna be the new trolling.
It's going to, and you know that, David. After listening to your interviews on Rank Brain, I mean, you were dead on.
Done after one more day.
I know, but you were accurate as heck. So thank you.
Well, no, as accurate as you can be. Again, that's why I like what the first thing we're starting Thursday with is what Bill brought up the other day. Is that you even if 3 different Googlers answer questions about it, you'll get 3 different answers. So if they're already confused enough in their own internal workings, we don't have a freaking clue. And this was like something 6 months ago that happened, and nobody cared until a few people decided to blog about it recently. And
but David,
I'm gonna pop back up and give it 6 months. We'll have another catchphrase.
Rank Brain is not new, David. You know that. It's not some. Everybody's starting to write about it, and everybody's talking about it. So absolutely, CEOs are going to adapt to it. Executives are like, oh, what's rank break? I got to get into that.
Some of that, of course, is confirmation bias. Bear in mind, when you actually search, there were dozens and dozens of articles written about this in October, November last year. And you probably can't remember most of them because it wasn't big news. But suddenly it's out that it's broken, that it's now live, that it's now making a difference, and suddenly you're seeing articles about rank break. There's no more. There was a flurry of them in November. They were tons.
I completely and totally blame the mods because that's just what I do. No, but it was Will Critchlow or whatever his name is. That's what got my attention. Was he wrote some fantasy press release that was coming from Google, and his link bait, he titled it "Links Were Dying," and really that's all you had to do to SEOs was say that A, SEO is dead, or B, links are dying, and that they're all going to start jumping through hoops, and I think that's what brought it back to life, and here we are again after this week. I'm really ready to kill anyone who brings a duck up.
I must admit, I didn't.
It was like this with caffeine. Caffeine was like this, man. Caffeine was exactly like this, man. Parallel processing was the main thing about that. Everyone's running around on how to rank for caffeine and how to this and that, and it really had nothing to do with any of that stuff. And it was it went nuts for like a month and a half.
Go back to the Florida update, David. I mean, that started the whole downward spiral for.
What do you know about the Florida update? What do you know about the Florida update? There are a lot of people saying they know something about it, but nobody's actually come out and said what it was.
Well, I worked for a company I left, and this is out there, but they were actually buying links from CNN, ABC. I mean, we ranked for some of the top, most expensive keywords that we were also buying advertising on AdWords with, right? So you look at the potential of a client going, okay, I can actually spend $3 for a click, or I'm going to buy the organic click through links, you know, and that was easy. But then when Florida hit, that was an eye-opener. It was just the first, like, I think the first blush Google came out with artificial intelligence saying, yeah, something's different, it doesn't look right, so let's put some type of actual filter on it. And I don't think anything further than that, but you build upon that with caffeine. You know, caffeine was another one that was supposed to be like Hummingbird, accelerating the algorithm, making it faster for search.
Caffeine had nothing to do with artificial intelligence.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't AI.
All right, I'm wrong. Yeah, no, I'm cool.
No. Neither did Florida. Florida had nothing to do with artificial intelligence.
No, but when you start looking at links, that's the first blush that Google, I think, had with you know, looking at a scheme that didn't make sense. You know, anchor text, everything else was associated to it, and so.
If you want to understand Florida, you need to understand the other patents that were around at that time and the things that Google would.
That's what we have built. Yeah.
Which of course.
When was it around? I've never heard of Florida before.
Florida was the first named update from Google. It was the first time we had an update that had a name.
Wasn't it? I thought Jagger wasn't Jagger before that, Jagger or whatever? No, it was after that.
That was after.
After. They're in alphabetical order, so one beginning with J comes after one beginning with F. They're always named after a letter of the alphabet.
Like hurricanes.
Florida was the very first one. It was named in Webmaster World.
Yeah, I know they were close.
Florida was actually probably the first time they did a major overhaul.
It was the first time one was named that, you know, it was seen wide enough to be called an update, and it was named Florida. The whole thing happened on Webmaster World, which was such a big forum at that time that it was the single biggest, loudest voice in the industry. So if they decide they're going to call it something, it gets called that thing.
I'm shocked. It wasn't on Digital Point.
Yeah, but I would say Florida.
I think there's more synchronization going on, and when you look at it, you know, basically Florida was central to the California piece, but then they had the data centers everywhere else. And I think that part of that was also the synchronization finally coming down, that we started to see what we call the Google dance, which is really, you know, right now, nobody knows what the Google dance was each time we would watch the algorithm dance. So.
Florida was the first time we really started to talk seriously about semantics, and particularly about topical authority and the idea of topic themes, you know, the idea of focus content.
Topic sensitive page rank.
Yes. Hilltop was, of course, one of the methods.
Oh, shit. Forgot that one, yeah. Nice.
That was the first major infrastructure and changes to the way they were doing things. First time I ever was surprised.
I'd say that the big lesson to get from this is that SEOs traditionally don't think a search engine can do a thing until it does a thing, and then, you know, the only way it could be doing that is by looking at data sources that you previously thought it couldn't be looking at. So it used to be that a lot of people thought, right, well, SEO, it just looks at the page. It can't tell anything that I haven't put on the page. So as long as I use the words right, you know, it was still very much that most people did SEO on a page-by-page basis. They'd learned to link spam, but it was
one of my favorite phrases in patent.
Number.
One of my favorite phrases in a patent is not limited to. Those skilled in the art, because they'll be talking about ways to find data. If it could be social circles or contacts in email or whatever, you know, they're looking. It'll always be those skilled in the art. Well, there's, you know, not limited to, and you know. So yeah, like you said, I don't think I put any source of data out of their reach to be used. You know, it's just a matter of how effective it is and cost effective and you know, quality effective it is. You know?
Yeah. And of course, that's the flip side, which, you know, we've talked about on a couple of other discussions recently. Things like, you know, a lot of people, because we know optical character recognition exists, everyone would assume that Google had optical character recognition going on in all of its images, and it doesn't. It just isn't worthwhile. It's not just that it costs a lot of resources. If it cost a lot of resources and was worth it, Google will find the resources.
Whereas the optical recognition is actually worth it on YouTube. So yeah, you know what I mean. They've done studies and used that over there far more effectively. And like you're saying, over there it pays to understand what someone's seeing, whereas it doesn't on a GIF or whatever image on your blog post.
Exactly. If you think how many photographs are taken in the street, or have a book in the background, or something, that's absolutely not germane to the image. It has nothing to do with the image. The idea of spending resources on analysing that text would add nothing. It doesn't matter what's written on the side of that bus, or what that street sign says to this particular image, because it's not meant to be in this place anyway. That's not what it's about. When it is, I'm looking at a restaurant, and there's the restaurant sign, yeah, that would be great. But how many images is that going to be true of? Well, it took less than 10%, where the optical character recognition would actually add anything of value.
Yeah, for sure.
And
it's the thing I thought about after we talked about it last time. I was like, see, it makes sense when they're getting some spots other places it's not going to. You know what I mean? Again, Google Books, it's kind of obvious because that's the only way to get them in there. So, is by scanning them. Whereas an image, a random image on a site, you're going to have a threshold or some sort of algorithmic instruction saying, no, not this one. So yeah, I don't see the motivation there.
If in future it started to look at particular kinds of images differently. So if it finds images on a travelogue site, where it's known that this site is all about travel to places, and the photographs are almost always of those travels. Now there the text might be important because it's something to do with the journey. There's more chance. At the moment, again, I just think that's a little bit computationally expensive for the benefit they see. But it's certainly something I would expect to turn up in thinking at some point, whether or not it ever makes it to a trial.
And then a quick question on that one, based off metadata, even on photos, what would you think, going back to my comment in chat here with the Google local guides, looking at spammers with reviews, photos, there's been a lot of talk about that with people just being able to upload images, add the reviews. Now we've got a different separation with a Google Plus viewer or a profile versus somebody that just has a regular account that they don't want to be almost anonymous. And when you look at that data, back to metadata and is really going back to, okay, how does Google look at that as AI to see, okay, if I was at that restaurant, I took this picture of my food, I took a picture of the actual entrance, I was there, so now I can actually go back and double check and make sure they're accurate. I don't know. I mean, that's maybe something I'm thinking it's supposed to do, but I haven't really seen that as a guide.
EXIF data is commonly used. Certain metadata with images is very commonly used, i.e. pretty much always. Other forms of metadata are less useful. Ultimately, you've always got to, I think one of the most important things you can do in SEO is look for the when doesn't this apply? When would this not be useful? Instead of looking at what you want to happen, think about the exact opposite. How could this go wrong? What could be wrong with this? What would make it a bad signal? And then look for whether that's going to happen enough to put Google off of using it. One thing that we've got out of so many conversations with so many Googlers, even going right back to Matt, Paul Haar has mentioned it, Andre certainly mentioned it. Google run thousands of tests, and not all of those tests end up being adopted. There's so many tests run that most searches you do, i.e. more than 50%, you're getting experimental results in some way, shape or form. The results page you get is experimental. The next part of that is the ones that even make it to trial.
Google is one big multivariate testing space.
Yeah, but they have a committee that decides on which ones even go live, and the vast majority of things put forward don't even get passed to go on an experiment. So you've got to understand that there are literally thousands of things a day that Google are looking at that don't get through.
And that lies in the confusion. And there's so many people on the internet right now, business owners, that they don't know the direction that they need. And you can even look at, going back to the Google Local Guides program, but you can go out and map an area and know that basically there's, out of a small area, radius-wise, maybe 50% of them or 80% of them, 50 to 60% so far that I've seen, don't even have their map listing verified. Therefore, if somebody was to add an image to their profile as a business, it's kind of like the business owner is not going to get notified. No, they're not going to notify that image is there, but the visitor is going to see that on their mobile device. Same thing with a review. If you got a review, you might want to go, hey, thank you for that kind remark, and I'm glad you enjoyed our services and our restaurant. Come back and maybe give an opportunity for 10% off on the next dinner. I don't know. But if without the business owner communicating, I think they're missing half the technology. That's free to them, really. Google's always changing, like you said, beta testing things all the time. But I think they're really pushing maps, mobile technology we've all seen. But where can we drive that next?
There's certainly a lot of plays going on, and there's lots of different departments in Google. There's lots of different people in Google, and to an extent, Google is a collective. There are lots of different people pushing in lots of different directions, and some of those ideas are good enough that everyone's yeah, I support that. And it doesn't mean that it's a company direction. The company direction is what's innovative, what's cool, what actually helps people. And thousands of individuals have thousands of different directions that they take that then go to the vote kind of thing. And then from the vote go into actual testing to see if it actually makes a difference in the real world. And I think sometimes people put much too much emphasis on Google as if it was, one of those traditional top-down infrastructure things where somebody says, right, we're going to do this. This is the company direction. There's very little of that, certainly in search. I think in things like Project Loon, yeah, you're going to see a little bit more of that. Although even then, people come up with crazy ideas, and if they can get the support for it, it becomes a project. So I think people really struggle.
Thank you for that explanation. I think even going back to, you make a good point there with just not thinking of Google. I mean, think of the map listing on Microsoft, or even Yahoo that's kind of in limbo right now. But, making sure even your telephone number or your address is correct across the universe. Make sure that that's all unique. And then going back to that whole knowledge graph thing, that's kind of tying it all back together. If everything is kind of pointing to a different telephone number, well, if you haven't verified your Google Map listing, that telephone's going to stick. And then you've got to actually go through the process of re-verifying with Google My Business, and that's a totally different project. But you'll see those projects come and they'll go. But Google My Business, it's gone through all those different migrations of name, but it's still the same thing.
Yep. We are coming up to the top of the hour, so we're going to be signing off shortly. But let's quickly do a thing of we used to do. What's coming up next week? Bill, start with you. What are you up to this coming week?
I am finally going to a meetup that I've been working on for weeks, trying to promote, trying to get people to go to. It's next Tuesday and Wednesday, and it should be fun. Got about 22 people signed up to go with us, and it's going to be in downtown San Diego, right on the harbor.
It's still too far for me to walk, so I can't make it. So, wish you the best of luck with it.
When are you going to be in downtown, Bill?
Next Tuesday and Wednesday.
We should get together. I'll be there on Tuesday.
Okay. Are you there for Social Media World?
Yep, Social Media Marketing World.
Ben, you never take me anywhere.
We can still have to go to Meowioki, of course, too.
Yeah.
The rest of our regular panel. Terry, what are you up to this coming week? Anything interesting?
Yeah, me and Dave, we got 2 or 3 hangouts scheduled, I think. We're pretty busy doing the client thing. Just the youth.
Doing the client thing always keeps you busy. Yeah, so
Yeah, I'm doing the same thing. I'm hanging out with you and Bill and Terry for the next week. There you go. Yeah. Oh, and sorry, Jennifer Slade. Can't forget Jennifer.
Yeah,
She'll be there Monday, so that'll be fun.
Kristin, you're sort of involved with their hangouts, so I know you'll be doing much the same. What else you got on?
Honestly, or you want the short version? I'll give you the short version. I'm doing wonderful right tag things.
Cool. So, Fab, you were in next. What are you up to this coming week?
Speak to some customer and then try to build some content that is useful for them rather than worrying too much about what Google wants to do. and I think that I have one question for everyone probably is at the end of the day, most of these people agencies or news sites, they're trying to build a product out of an update, but at the end, you guys have been doing this for quite a long time. And did you actually change the way you work so dramatically because of these updates? Yes, maybe something would have changed the way you see things and your understanding. Yeah, and I understand that people want to dig deeper and understand how the engine evolves. But at the end of the day, have you changed anything that in something?
Let me try, because we're short on time for Evan here. Let me try this real quickly. If you have not been slowly evolving with Google, then you might have to make major changes right now. If you have been slowly evolving with Google like we do, it really doesn't make a huge difference in how you do things because you've been evolving the entire time. Now, if a client situation or something you walk into is still sitting back in 2010, then you might have a whole bunch of things to do. But I can't speak for the rest of the boys, but for me, because I'm constantly evolving with them, what I do at any point never changes drastically. It's just little tinkering and little tweaks, you know.
Exactly, but that's not a new service that you said. That's not a new way to do things. Something is changing slightly as usual, but not to the point where we should stop doing SEO and doing rank brain optimization. You know, that's the kind of thing that.
Yeah, but you shouldn't be optimizing for long tail keywords as much. That should be really de-emphasized as kind of a waste of time.
We'll carry on this one, no doubt, in the green room. I certainly have a few things on that. Ben, what are you up to this week?
Social media marketing world, just getting ready and revved up for that, and same stuff I do every single day with our entire client base. Just actually, to answer what Fab had to say is, I would say it wouldn't really change a lot. It's just that always optimizing for the end user, for the actual person who's the customer. So
the short version of that is pretty much as Dave said. Most of the time that these algorithm updates come along, they underline something we'd already been telling people to change 6 months earlier, but they ignored it because it didn't have Google's just changed attached to it. It was, this is going to become important, and we're saying you should be changing towards this, and this is the latest state of the industry. But while it's the latest state of the industry, or while it's just abstract research, people don't change. They wait until Google slaps them in the face with it, sadly. William, what are you up to this week?
Well, quite a bit, but not actually SEO stuff or marketing stuff. I basically got 15,000 steps for today's walk, so that I think indicates 5 miles walked. I think. So working on my health and basically overcoming a lot of different things that you guys have all known, but being able to come back in the industry and just really try to answer some questions for people. In going back to the whole question that Fabio, I can't pronounce your name, we have adapted with it. We watched it. I've been in the industry since 1998 when I got injured as a firefighter/ski instructor. Got kind of forced into technology and had to learn Google. And I had the opportunity to learn with Clay, looking for white hat optimization. I didn't get kind of diverted into some of the black. That there's, even though still, the blog posts, that's out there. People are always talking about, oh, Black Hat's always winning, but I think with artificial intelligence, machine learning, algorithms, the Panda, Penguin, it's not really changing, it's adapting and knowing that, okay, you knew that you were buying links and that was probably wrong, where you were spinning articles or buying blog posts. Those techniques are now found pretty quickly. And I think those are going to go away, and it's going to go back to the whole visitor experience thing that we've always focused on, conversions, and at the end of the day, making money and being clean with what we do at the end of the day.